And this, our last treat. So last year, we had the Poet Laureate of Illinois speak to you and challenge you and change your thinking. We've got another global artist speaking to you now and closing out our conference. I tried to get him this. How big is he? Those of you who are not into the art world, because I know you're all just urban and transportation geeks, right? Last year I was trying to get him, but he couldn't because he was opening the Serpentine Pavilion of 2022, the Black Chapel in London's Kensington Gardens, which he built with the design with the help of David Ajay and Associates. He is a global artist, but he was born here in Chicago in the 70s. He was raised in East Garfield Park. He sang in the church choir and helped his father with the roofing business, which emerges over and over again in the themes of his work. He went to Lane Tech, those of you from Chicago, and he went to Iowa State for urban planning and fine arts and religious studies in the University of Cape Town, and then back again to Iowa State in 2006 for ceramics and religious studies and urban planning. He's always breaking both the silos and icons of what an urban planner and an artist is. And I have the privilege of calling him my friend and someone I've learned from about how communities matter. His work is always suffused not just with beauty, but kind of community energy and deep faith in the world and in the people that he works with and that he knows in this community. So help me welcome Theaster Gates. Thanks, man. Thank you.
Chris really knew how to work this stage. I was taking notes. I have to you got to practice your stage situation. So I'm just gonna get warmed up here. Oh, mobility, equal access. Thanks for having me. And Benji's a sweetheart, and I'd like to give him and his team a hand for their hard work in getting us all here. Thank you, brother. I should have shaved my head today. Pardon the blind spot there. I wanted to first offer my allegiance and alliance to the topic of mobility, given I was a transit planner at the Chicago Transit Authority for 7.5 years under Frank Cruzy, and Valerie Jarrett was our chair, and a woman named Beth White was my boss. Peter Fehrenwald. There's a lot of names that haunt me in my dreams when I think about the good old days at CTA. But when I met Beth White and Marcel Acosta, geez, they keep coming, the names. I was in Seattle at a transportation conference. I was talking about a public art project that I was working on, the Soto Corridor in Seattle, south of downtown. And I was saying, some graffiti artists here and some mosaics are here. And at the end of my bus tour, this beautiful white-haired lady named Beth White came up to me and said, we're from Chicago. Would you like to help us build our transit arts program in Chicago? I had tried getting a job at home for 10 years, and I realized that I didn't know anybody. So it was very difficult to get a job at the time. And so I said, I'm from Chicago, and I would love to think about transit art at home. So about 1.5 years later, I ended up working for Chairman Jarrett and created the Chicago Transit Arts Program, which at the time was a kind of nebulous idea, but we had some federal transit resources coming for the reconstruction of the Douglas Blue Line. And it was my job to first write the policy to the FTA and ensure that a portion of that money could be set aside for public art. And then I had to convince the CTA that that we should spend money like that. And I think LA had the most ambitious public art program, spending 5% of their transportation budget on public art, new construction. And I think everybody else in the world was like 0.005% to 0.5% or 1% if you were lucky. The Douglas Blue Line was, I don't know what the numbers were, but it was probably a couple $100 million worth of work, and we were excited to put art in those stations. The reason I'm offering this with Benji's preamble is because in some ways the topic of mobility has always been directly connected to art, at least in my transit art life. And I'll talk a little bit about how those things merged 25 years later as I did work with the 95th Street station here. So I'm at CTA. It's my 5th day at work. I have dreadlocks and a nose ring. The chairman is coming to the office. Everybody gets nervous when Chairman Jarrett was in the office. And it was time for me to meet Valerie. And I walked up to her, said, "Hello, ma'am." And she looked at me and she said, "You can keep the dreads. You got to lose the nose ring. See you tomorrow." And so I took my nose ring out, and I came back to work and kept the locks. I kept them for some time. I kept them. They went away. And then we were set to task at dreaming about how we could create not only better mobility, in the sense that you guys are talking about today, I think, but how also we could make a better user experience while people were moving through our city. One of the things that was very, very important was that at the time that I came, our general contractor, our master contractor, the boss daddy, had already taken the architectural allocations. All of the money that would have been used for anything pretty was tied up in the construction budget, and our construction guys were also very excited to use that because they could do a brass rail that they recycled from the merchandise mart, and they could resell it for a fuckload of money. But it was time for me to now negotiate the difference between an architectural fitting and a public art program. So I was scheduled to meet with a guy whose food appetite was on par with mine, but I was about 30 years his junior. So when we went to the steakhouse, it was very interesting. I paid for my own dinner. That was part of the responsibility of being a city worker. But he was very excited to pay for my meal and talk to me about the importance of his work in general contracting. All of that work for 7 years helped me in my artistic practice. I learned how to read construction documents. I learned how to read blueprints. I learned how to negotiate at a city level and a federal level. I wrote good memos. That's when you had to have a to and a from and a subject and talk about things. The good old days, pre-internet. Maybe we had I don't know what it was called, but it wasn't called the internet. It was something else. But I found that those years of advocacy allowed me to marry my passion for art with my passion for the fact that people needed to move around. And I remember Frank Cruzy was saying, it would be great if somebody at the CTA could help us with this. We need bikes on our buses. We need people to be able to ride their bikes and get to a bus. And so my first project was actually bike racks and looking at the feasibility of folding bikes. And I remember a group of, a bunch of people who were not bike experts, but they were really good at getting CTA contracts. They all came with varying versions. A Brompton folding bike. It's British. Yeah, do you carry a Brompton? Yeah, you want one? They're really cool. You know, it's the swing hinge, and you know, you can just like get it under your arm, and you look sophisticated. It's probably a British bike. It's very nice, very nice. And I remember looking at like maybe 15 of these folding bikes in varying facets of their work, and then it was actually part of my job to get this contract for bike racks, the kind of first outfitting of bike racks. It was a good gig. It's actually a good gig. Anyway, I should show you a picture. This is a little bit later. This time at CTA was very important for me, though, because it also demonstrated for me how sometimes if policy isn't directly connected to the communities that they're making policies about, we can have severe missteps. I'll give you an example. I lived at Pulaski and Chicago Avenue. My nearest train stop was Pulaski, and the next one was Kimball on the Green Line. The Central Park stop didn't exist yet, even though Central Park was very, very important. I remember once the Pulaski stop was down, which meant that I either had to get off at Kimball and walk, which was not a very safe walk in the early 90s. It was a pretty dangerous walk. Or I had to take the Lake Street train. And I remember being in a room when we were trying to decide whether or not the Central Park stop was important. So you had people who lived on the Purple Line far north, and they were like, looking at the numbers, people don't use the Green Line as much as we used to. Let's shut some of these stations down. It was like, whoa, 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 you know? And I remember going to community meetings where people who kind of needed public transit the most were probably the ones who didn't feel they had the voice, the right voice that they could argue their rights against a transit authority. So I was sent out to kind of these meetings to be like the Brown liaison. Do you know that feeling, Benji? So I was sent out, and it was my job to tell people why we were going to shut some stations down. And it was at that point that I thought, this is an extremely severe problem, that they would send a junior planner in to tackle an issue that was so far over my head, and then try to justify something that I knew deep in my heart wasn't right. And at that point, then, fortunately, I could have other kinds of conversations with the team and say like, hey, maybe we should think about this, you know? Maybe even though the numbers appear to be very low at the station, those who use this station probably need public service more than anybody else riding our train lines. And is there ever a time when the need that a more senior adult worker every day has to use train, does need ever qualify as an equity proposition? Probably. I probably couldn't say it in one sentence, but I could say it loudly at the time with my dreadlocks. So I could probably say like, what the fuck, you know? But I remember that like, even though those things, so in addition to being the Transit Arts Planner 2, whatever that was, I also remember having to learn to advocate for the communities that I deeply believed in, right? I also remember that there were moments where there was infrastructure in our stations, but like say sound systems that were used to announce the arrival and the departing of a train. And I remember that we spent lots of money in some of these stations on these sound systems, but they were rarely used. You know, the attendants wouldn't use them. There wasn't an automated device. But I thought, man, there's probably infrastructure that costs hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars per station. And I'm super interested in that. So I held those things. Some years pass. There's a public art opportunity by the city of Chicago at 95th Street. I get a call asking if I would be one of the artists that participate in the selection process. I say, sure. We get in the process, and part of the job is to meet with communities and listen to them talk about what they need. In addition to faster trains and safer and cleaner trains, they were saying, we want a station that reflects our history. And we want a station that reflects the present. And we want a station that reflects the future. And we want a station that is hip and clean. And we want to learn things as we're moving through the stations. Because you have televisions in the station. We want the stations to kind of celebrate local dignitaries and remind us of the great legacies of the Black experience on the South Side. I was like, man, it's a really tall order, for a mural. That's a lot to ask for like a $75,000 mural, the present and the future and the past. And I remember thinking, really trying to take this conversation in and thinking, what could I offer that only a person who knew transit well could offer? And I went back to the city and I said, I think we should build a house music radio station. And they were like, when did house music become a form of public art? Or how might a radio station work at 95th Street? And I said, well, people want to know things. So could we interview people in my radio station? People want to be reminded of the past and the future. We could play Dusties on Friday, and then we could play SZA on Monday mornings and wake it up. And then during the week, we could jack. So people could listen to, I don't know, Marvin Gaye, Curtis Mayfield, Donny Hathaway, Aretha Franklin, Roberta Flack. We could and that if there was this other experience that could happen in addition to getting to work, that if we were there at 7 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, aiding this ride, that maybe we could make their mobility experience one filled with pleasure. Some administrators had to go back and kind of think about that. I said, well, I've already done some homework. I know that we're putting an amazing sound system. There's already audio infrastructure in the redesign of 95th Street, because I got insider friends at the CTA. What if we connected, it was known as ASOP, a song for our people. What if we connected my radio station that fits into what would have probably been an underused vendor situation anyway? Why don't we take that space, add heat, add electricity, and plug me into the station system? They said, we'll get back to you. And in getting back to me, they found out that not only could we plug into 95th Street Station, but that all stations over the years that I've been gone had the ability to be, single messages could be pumped through all stations simultaneously. So I was like, oh shit, this is amazing. I could play Curtis Mayfield through all stations on the CTA at the same time. Al Green, I'm so tired of being alone, tired of pulling my own. This could be amazing. They said yes to the public art project. It's been now 5 years since ASOP has been at 95th Street. An amazing woman named Ayana Contreras has become our primary DJ. And we're also teaching kids how to spin in the adjacent schools, and they come to the station and they practice their DJ skills. It's better than a police officer at creating safety and community and creating good energy, and even the thieves want to kick it. Like it shifts the energy of the space, you know? And it's like whatever the DJ is on that day. So if it's like old soul or like new R&B or slow jams on a Friday evening, it's all working. And you know, we were out a couple weeks ago at 95th Street, and my 5 years is up. That was the length of the public art project. They basically said, if it sucks, we can pull it in 5 years. It didn't totally suck. So we decided to just kind of talk to the attendants because we thought maybe the attendants would get a little bit tired of hearing music on Mondays and Fridays or every day. And they were like, look, we're so glad that you've been given legal permission to make our working experience all day legitimately soulful. Thank you so much, you know. And I wanted to tell this single story to you all because I think when I think about my own life, it has something to do with a kind of creative or intellectual mobility. You know, if we can put transportation aside for a minute and just talk for a second about like curiosity and the ability to kind of move between the discipline that you learned in school, the vocation or profession that you have, and then to kind of gain sympathy for what else might a person who's trying to move through a city want to feel? What else might they need to feel? And I thought soul is a good thing. You know, like, you know, some Bjork on a Tuesday, you know, some Hootie and the Blowfish on a Thursday, you know, some Def Leppard. Any Def Leppard friend? You don't have to raise your hands, just like nod or wink. I see you, brother. See Def Leppard. Counting Crows. But that we have the ability to not only shape the kind of infrastructural experiences of our varying clients, but we also get to shape potentially the emotional experiences. So in this case, I'm bragging about a public artwork, a radio station, a DJ booth that is probably the first in the country. But for me, it had to do with like being willing to expect that our centers of mobility had other value propositions that they could add. And that if they were to think more deeply about the whole human experience, we could find ourselves creating pleasure even in the cold. That people, while waiting, would wait like this, and the wait would be a little bit better, you know, that they could, you know, and that might also help aid the warmth, you know. I don't know deeply what it means to be a transit arts planner anymore. It's been a few years. But what I feel pretty passionate about is that everybody has the right to move and the right to get from one spot to another spot in the places where they live. And as you guys get that part right, I'll try to do my job, which is to try to make that experience the sexiest, most soulful experience that any human could encounter. Thanks for letting me end the day with you.